Welcome to Learning English from People.
Angela Merkel, the anchor in a gathering storm. For 16 years, one leader stood out in the turbulent world of global politics. Her name was Angela Merkel. In a time of constant change and loud voices, she was a symbol of stability and calm. As the first female chancellor of Germany, she became the quiet leader of Europe. She guided her country through one crisis after another, from a global financial crash to a worldwide pandemic. For a long time, her legacy seemed clear. She was the ultimate crisis manager, the steady hand in every storm. But today, that legacy is being questioned. The world is looking at her decisions in a new, harsher light. Did her calm, careful approach help create an even bigger storm? Did the anchor of stability fail to see the hurricane gathering just over the horizon? This is the central question of her story, a story full of quiet contradictions. Angela Merkel's story begins with a strange journey. She was born in the West German city of Hamburg in 1954. But just a few weeks later, her family did something unusual. They moved to East Germany. At that time, thousands of people were fleeing the communist East for the free West. Her father, a Lutheran pastor, chose to go in the opposite direction, to lead a church in a small town. This decision placed young Angela in a complicated world. In East Germany, the government was officially against religion. As a pastor's daughter, she was part of a group that was educated but also watched with suspicion. Inside her home, she enjoyed open discussions and intellectual freedom. Outside, she learned that caution was necessary for survival. This childhood created two sides of her personality. In public, she learned to fit in. In private, she learned to think for herself. She was a brilliant student, especially in mathematics and Russian, winning national awards. She joined the Free German Youth, the official communist youth group. This was almost a requirement for any student who wanted to go to university. She later said her role was cultural, organizing things like theater tickets, but it was a lesson in how to navigate a system where you had to participate, even if you didn't fully believe. Life in East Germany taught her a deep pragmatism. She learned to focus on what was possible and to work within strict limits. She later said that life there was almost comfortable in a certain way because there were some things one simply couldn't influence. This mindset would define her entire political career. Her scientific mind was shaped at Leipzig University, where she studied physics. The world of science was based on logic, data, and proof. It was a clear contrast to the political ideology that filled society outside the lab. It was here she met her first husband, Ulrich Merkel. She kept his last name even after they divorced a few years later. Near the end of her studies, she faced a critical test. The Stasi, East Germany's secret police, offered her a good job as a professor. But there was a condition. She had to agree to report on her colleagues. Merkel refused. Her excuse was clever. She told them she was a terrible gossip and couldn't keep a secret. It was an early sign of the quiet strength hidden beneath her simple exterior. By refusing, she chose a different path, one that kept her away from the center of power. For the next decade, politics was not her focus. She worked as a research scientist in East Berlin, earning her doctorate in quantum chemistry. She was a scientist, living a quiet academic life. She was not a protester or a revolutionary. But then, history came knocking. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. For millions of Germans, it was a night of wild celebration. People flooded through the checkpoints, laughing and crying. But what did Angela Merkel do? She went to her weekly sauna appointment, as usual. Afterward, she crossed into West Berlin for a short while, had a beer with strangers, and went home. Her reaction was not emotional, it was methodical. For her, the real change was not the party in the streets. It was the sudden opening of a new world of possibilities. For the first time in her life, she had a real chance to shape events. A month later, at age 35, the physicist walked into the office of a new political party called Democratic Awakening. She had no political experience, but her calm intelligence was clear. Soon, she was the party's press spokeswoman. She faced her first political crisis when the party's leader was discovered to be a Stasi informant right before an election. Journalists swarmed, but Merkel handled the chaos with amazing calm. Her professionalism impressed powerful people. When Germany was reunified in 1990, her career took off. She joined the Christian Democratic Union, CDU, the powerful center-right party of West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. She won a seat in the new, all-German parliament. An East German woman in a party dominated by West German men, she was an outsider. Helmut Kohl, the giant of German politics, saw her potential. He made her a minister in his cabinet, first for women and youth, then for the environment. He often called her my girl. The name showed he was her mentor, but it also showed that he underestimated her. He didn't see the powerful ambition she kept hidden. Her true political skill and a touch of ruthlessness was revealed after her party lost the 1998 election. Kohl and the CDU became trapped in a major financial scandal. The party's old guard tried to protect their leader. Merkel did the unthinkable. She wrote an article for a major newspaper, publicly breaking with the man who had made her career. She said the party needed to move on from its old leader and build a new future. It was a cold, decisive act that shocked the political world, but it positioned her as a clean, modern reformer. The girl had shown everyone that she was her own woman. In 2000, she was elected leader of the CDU, the first woman and first East German to hold the job. She was patient. In 2002, she stepped aside to let a more popular candidate run for chancellor. He lost, but she used the time to strengthen her power within the party. She waited for her moment. That moment came in 2005. She ran for chancellor against the popular incumbent Gerhard Schröder. The election was incredibly close. Neither side won a clear majority. For weeks, Germany was without a leader. Merkel led tense negotiations and finally built a grand coalition with her main rivals. On November 22, 2005, Angela Merkel was sworn in as Germany's first female chancellor. Her 16 years as chancellor were defined by a series of rolling crises. Her method for dealing with them became famous. It was even turned into a verb, Merkeln, which meant to wait and think before acting. Some saw this as weakness or indecision. In reality, it was a deliberate strategy. She would study a problem from every angle, listen to all sides, and wait for the best moment to act. And when she finally did act, she was firm and determined. Her first great test came with the 2008 global financial crisis. As banks around the world started to fail, Merkel's government at first hesitated. But as the danger grew, she made a bold move. She appeared on television and personally guaranteed all private savings in German banks. This single act calmed the public panic and helped stabilize the economy. The financial crisis led directly to the Eurozone crisis. Countries like Greece were in deep financial trouble, threatening the entire European currency. As Europe's economic leader, Germany was asked to pay the bill. Merkel became the face of austerity. She demanded strict financial reforms from countries in exchange for bailout money. In southern Europe, she was hated. Protesters in Athens drew pictures of her in a Nazi uniform. But in Germany, she was praised for protecting taxpayer money. Her goal was clear: to save the euro and the European Union, which she believed were essential for Germany's future. Another major shift came in 2011. A tsunami in Japan caused a disaster at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The world watched in horror. Merkel, a scientist who understood the risks, made a sudden and dramatic decision. She announced that Germany would shut down all of its nuclear power plants. This policy, the energy transition, was a huge change. It showed she could respond to public fears and new information, but it also had a long-term consequence. It made Germany more dependent on other energy sources, especially natural gas from Russia. Her most defining moment, however, came in the summer of 2015. Hundreds of thousands of refugees, many fleeing the terrible war in Syria, were traveling across Europe. Thousands were stuck in terrible conditions in Hungary. Merkel made a decision that would shape her legacy forever. She decided to open Germany's borders. Almost 1 million asylum seekers entered the country that year. Her famous words, "We can do this," inspired a powerful, if brief, period of welcoming culture in Germany. It was a decision based on deep moral feeling and the lessons of Germany's own dark history. But it came with a huge political cost. The large number of newcomers strained public services and created social tensions. It fueled the rise of the far-right Alternative for Germany party. The crisis divided Europe and even caused a bitter fight within her own party. It was perhaps the only time she led with her heart instead of her head. It remains the most controversial act of her time in office. In her final years, she faced 2 more global challenges. First, the presidency of Donald Trump in the United States strained the old alliances. After one difficult meeting, Merkel said that the times when Europe could completely rely on others were over to a certain extent. She was suddenly seen as the new leader of the free world. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic. Here, her scientific background was a huge advantage. Her televised speeches to the German people were calm, clear, and based on data. She explained complex scientific ideas in a way everyone could understand. Germany's early response to the pandemic was seen as one of the most successful in the world, adding to her reputation as a master of crisis management. In 2018, she announced she would not run for chancellor again. She managed a long, slow, and stable exit from power, finally stepping down in December 2021. She had been in office for 16 years, almost matching Helmut Kohl's record. She left power as she had held it, quietly, without a big show, returning to the same modest apartment in Berlin where she had lived for years. When she left office, leaders around the world praised her. She was seen as a symbol of reason, stability, and decency in a chaotic world. But history's judgment is never final. Just a few months after she retired, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Suddenly, the very foundation of Merkel's foreign policy was shaken. Her main idea had been to build stability through economic partnership, especially with difficult countries like Russia and China. This policy was called change through trade. The hope was that economic ties would make these countries more democratic and peaceful. Now, this strategy looked like a dangerous mistake. Her strong support for the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which brought Russian gas directly to Germany, was seen as a terrible error. It had given Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, a powerful economic weapon to use against Europe. Critics said her policies had not changed Russia for the better. Instead, they had made Germany dangerously dependent on Russian energy. People also pointed to years of low spending on the German military during her time in office. The crisis manager was now being blamed for helping to create the conditions for Europe's biggest crisis in decades. Angela Merkel, the person, remains as complex as her legacy. She is a woman of deep contrasts. She was one of the most powerful people in the world, yet she guarded her private life fiercely. Her husband, Joachim Sauer, is also a quantum chemist. He was seen so rarely in public that he was called the Phantom of the Opera. She was a global leader who enjoyed the simplest things: baking plum cakes, watching soccer, and hiking in the mountains. Her style was famously plain. She wore a simple uniform of trousers and a blazer, which she owned in many different colors. Her leadership style was that of a scientist. It was analytical, logical, and based on evidence. She was not a passionate speaker who moved crowds with grand speeches, yet she could also connect with people on a deeply human level, as she did with the refugees she met. She had a dry sense of humor that many people missed and a powerful mind. She spoke fluent Russian, which allowed her to speak directly with Vladimir Putin. She was not afraid of him. Once, he brought his large black dog into a meeting, knowing she was afraid of dogs. Merkel remained perfectly calm. Later, she said, "I understand why he has to do this, to prove he's a man. He's afraid of his own weakness." So, who was Angela Merkel? Was she the steady hand who saved Europe from one disaster after another? Or was she the cautious leader whose focus on short-term stability left Germany and Europe vulnerable to a long-term threat? Her story shows the incredible complexity of leadership. She was the essential leader for an age of non-stop crises, a captain who kept the ship steady through rough seas. The final question of her legacy is whether, in focusing so hard on the waves in front of her, she failed to notice the hurricane building on the horizon.